Hi everyone. I'm going to talk about the law reform submission and hopefully give you some ideas about where to start. This assessment requires you to develop your ability to contribute to the development of policy and law reform in family law. Legislation in this area, more than most other areas of law, tends to be reformed quite frequently, and that's due to the fact that there is a lot of social change occurring at the moment. As I said in the first lecture, because of that huge pace of social change, there are problems if the law fails to keep up with that. And that's particularly where community attitudes move a long way ahead of the law. The law in those circumstances can become largely irrelevant, and it can also allow significant injustices to occur. So it's important to have some forms of regulation in many areas where social change is occurring around the family. At the end of last year, I attended the first conference that I'd ever attended of the International Society of Family Law. I found it a really interesting experience, and the two key issues that were discussed at that regional conference were, first of all, child abduction, international child abduction under the Hague Convention, and secondly, surrogacy across national boundaries. A document has been prepared by the Hague Conference on Private International Law that looks at surrogacy, and I invite you to have a look at that. You don't have to, but it's there if you wish to have a look at it. Those two issues reveal just how fast the pace of globalisation is becoming. So increasingly national boundaries are permeable, and law is something that will occur across national boundaries. So that is because the social realities mean that in any one country you are dealing with issues of what is occurring in other countries, and surrogacy is no exception to that. In fact, it's one of those areas where there's a lot of cross-national boundary activity happening that may require regulation by law. In Australia, we don't only have to deal with that issue of what is happening outside Australia and how that impacts inside Australia, but we have very inconsistent legislation at this stage between the states and territories, and that is where the legislation currently sits. And that's what you've got to address in your law reform issue. How do we deal with these problems across national boundaries and internally in relation to the issue of surrogacy? You need to define what you mean by surrogacy, and that's something that you would always do when you're writing a law reform submission. You would understand the concepts that apply. So you need to make an argument for or against change, but first of all you have to grapple with what the law currently is. I'm not going to say a lot more about the content of the topic, that's for you to do with your research, but I do want to address briefly the criteria that I've set you, and I want to add a few cautions for you to think about. In terms of the marking criteria, before I begin, I need to say that I'm only speaking to the marking criteria. You need to write your assignment according to the marking criteria. You need to have footnotes according to AGLC 3, and you need to have a bibliography. But you need to read those marking criteria very carefully in the first instance. They're on Blackboard under Assessments, Law Reform Submission Information. You'll note that the matrix sets out the kinds of marks you can expect to get in relation to the standard of work that you present. The first criteria asks you to demonstrate a critical understanding of how the law operates. This includes legislation, case law, and any relevant procedure. You won't have word space to outline this in great detail, so you need to digest the commonalities and differences across the states and territories, including the issues that this pattern of regulation raises. Better answers will also grapple with how the law can be changed to respond to these issues. The second criteria is about research. There is a lot of material out there, and you need to find the key authoritative texts or articles that you'll rely on. By all means, use submissions that other people have written in relation to surrogacy, but make sure that you reference them accordingly. Please be very mindful of plagiarism. Where I find it, I have obligations to report it, and I really prefer not to find it. In the third criteria, you're being marked for your ability to make an argument and to recognise the values and policy considerations that underlie that argument. So you need to work hard here to work out what your values are in relation to this area of law. Family law, like most areas of law, is shot through with values and preferences, and it's important that you're aware of your own and that you're aware of the values and policy considerations that underlie the current law and any future law reform. The fourth criteria spells out the importance of being able to write. You're final year students, and you shouldn't underestimate the importance of these written skills in your future professional lives. Also, if you want to be heard in any forum that determines law or policy, and I would hope you will contribute in this way in the future, you have to be able to communicate your ideas succinctly and clearly. I would suggest you start your submission early and you polish it to pick up the extra marks in this area. Finally, your referencing needs to be accurate, comprehensive, clear and in accordance with AGLC 3. So put the time in here, or again it will bring the standard of your submission and your marks down. There are a number of challenges in writing this submission. The biggest challenge is the word length. So you have to think very carefully about how you're going to approach the topic and the issues raised, and in relation to the marking matrix as well. Your footnotes and your bibliography don't count towards that 1,500 words, and I give you a 10% buffer, but no more. If you do write more than that 1,500 words, including the buffer, as well as that buffer, then you will be marked down. So you can anticipate that's what will happen. Please record accurately the body of your submission, including any titles that you use, so the entire body other than footnotes and bibliography is included, and write that somewhere on your assignment when you submit it to Turnitin. If you have to submit a PDF, then that's okay, but please email me a Word copy. I'm not inclined to try and read PDF documents to see how many words there are, but I am also not impressed when I have to contact students who either have incorrectly or haven't at all given me some idea of the word length. So please pay attention to that. Note that late submission, as in most assignments, attracts significant penalties. If you think there's a good reason for you to be late with your law reform submission and that it fits the special circumstances policy, please make contact with me as early as you can. I work really hard to make sure that you're not advantaged if you are in that kind of situation. So any further questions that you might have in relation to this assignment can be included on discussion board under the law reform submission thread. I'll answer those questions for everybody to